everyone, welcome back to another round of Tuesday Night Legacy. Tonight, we've got Elves versus Loam Pox. On the left, we have Steven playing an Elves list that was made popular by local streamer legend Newton. This is basically the Elves list that has had inserted into it this toolbox strategy featuring Elvish Reclaimer and the Fiend Artisan. So Fiend Artisan is a pretty cool card. I don't know if you've heard of Birthing Pod before, but Fiend Artisan is pretty close to Birthing Pod. Instead of whatever the CMC of the creature is sacrificed, that doesn't matter at all. You just sacrifice that creature, but you can pay X into it and then grab a creature that is converted mana cost X or less. So Fiend Artisan also grows for each creature that's in the graveyard. So this card is astonishingly good at bringing back the game, especially after a board wipe. Elves are notorious to dying to effects that are elf type, -1/-1. Fiend Artisan does not have that drawback. So if somebody plays a Plague Engineer on you, then your Fiend Artisan is like a 15/15. Maybe that's going to win the game by itself. Who knows? If it's not, then it's going and finding any creature that you want out of the deck, but it also does a really good job of winning the old-fashioned ways that Elves has always done by using Craterhoof Behemoth when your board state is massive. You have X creatures in play, they all get +X/+X and gain trample, and you just turn it sideways and completely overrun your opponent. This deck also runs the Allosaurus Shepherd, which can turn all of your elves into 5/5s, which is also a way to win. And it also runs Natural Order, which can go and find you a green creature and put it into play, which can either be the Craterhoof Behemoth, or if you really want to, you can grab Atraxa Grand Unifier out of the sideboard after game 1. And on the right, we have Carlos playing a Loam Pox strategy, basically a stacks deck from Commander turned into a Legacy deck. This is based all around that wonderful card everybody likes to see, Smallpox. This deck just loves to tax your opponent's resources, albeit the cards out of their hand, the permanents in play, and that does include lands, since Smallpox is forcing everybody to sacrifice a land, creature, and discard a card and lose 1 life. The life doesn't matter as much, but everything else pretty big. And this card is supposed to be fair because it's equal. You know, I have to sacrifice things too. It's a big deal. But turns out that you don't care nearly as much about losing your lands because you're playing Life from the Loam. Life from the Loam allows you to get 3 lands back from your graveyard, and then you can also dredge this card back to your hand. It's an excellent strategy paired with something like Liliana the Veil, which is forcing your opponent to discard their cards, and then, of course, you have removal spells in Assassin's Trophy and Sudden Edict. And then the rest of this deck is basically an Urza Saga package. So not only are you making the big constructs from Urza Saga, but it's also got a Curse Scroll, which can deal damage each turn if you have 1 card in hand. I always forget if it's your opponent that has the 1 card or if you have the 1 card. The Nile Spell Bomb to deal with their graveyard, Pithing Needle to deal with a problematic permanent, Retrofitter Foundry to give you gas, or Shadow Spear to put on one of those constructs to just run over your opponent with Trample and Lifelink. I would say the only drawback to this deck is it's not super fast. It can definitely start to take over the game early with like those turn 1 Thoughtseize into turn 2 Hymn to Turok that we saw employed in the Death Shadow strategy, but it doesn't have any counter spells. So if a deck wants to go off and they have all of the means and resources to do so, and you can't do anything about it, then that's kind of it. But if you try to challenge Loam Pox to a Grindfest, almost assuredly you will lose that Grindfest. All right, now that we know a little bit more about the decks, let's get into the matches. And just as a side note, once again, we were using an autofocus camera for these matches, so it will get blurry every once in a while. I apologize. We are working on it. Here we go. So we see Steven starting out with a wooded foothills, maybe into a bayou, into a Elvish Reclaimer, which is going to be able to get any land out of his deck, basically like a crop rotation, I guess, if you want to call it that. You have to pay 2 mana and tap it, and the land comes in tapped, so it's a little bit slower. We see Carlos with the turn 1 Thoughtseize taking the Natural Order, stopping him from turning the Elvish Reclaimer into something even more scary. Gaia's Cradle is going to get mana for each creature in play. We see 2 mana is going to get the Fiend Artisan into play. So just a 1/1 for now. A Smallpox. Wow, what happened there? Steven discarded his entire hand. Smallpox only made you discard 1 card and sack a land. So I guess we got rid of the Elvish Reclaimer and the Bayou and discarded the Endurance. So that was pretty massive play here. Carlos just with the Urborg in play. Steven smartly keeping the Gaia's Cradle as his land, being able to make a lot of mana. And I guess favoring the Dryad Arbor, which I guess makes sense because you have to sacrifice another creature with the Fiend Artisan. You don't want to sacrifice the Fiend Artisan itself. Carlos just putting down a Wasteland and passing turn, cycling that Barrenmoor. Fiend Artisan a 4/4 already here. Or a 3/3, excuse me. Just crashing in for 4 damage. Carlos already down to 9. I guess I missed a couple of attacks here. We're Green Sun Zenithing for 1. Gonna go and find a CMC creature 1 or less. Yeah, decides that the Elvish Reclaimer is the right choice here. Only 2 lands in the yard right now, so not quite +2/+2 yet. Looks like Carlos is a little bit starved on mana. Passes the turn back. We're seeing another crash for 4, down to 5. And an Urza Saga from Steven. I forgot that he was playing these. How many does he have? I don't see any Urza Saga in his list. So it might be just slightly different than Newton's list here. I think he scooped it up, and we are on to game 2 here. Seeing a Dark Confidant into Liliana the Veil, just an Ignoble Hierarch on the left, sacrifice a creature, crash for 2. Carlos a lot more in command of this game. We're seeing a Retrofitter Foundry in Steven's hands. The Elvish Reclaimer coming out. Another mana. The Retrofitter Foundry. Retrofitter Foundry, not doing a whole lot. Yeah, this list is a little bit different than the one he gave me. But Retrofitter Foundry, we can pull it up on Carlos's list here. Basically making servos that can turn to Thopters that can turn to constructs. Plussing up, discarding a card, a Smallpox, and a Green Sun Zenith. A Sudden Edict is going to get rid of the only blocker that Steven had, and 2 more damage in, down to 15. Carlos kind of exactly where he wants to be right now. Ooh, you love to see it. Revealing a land off of the Dark Confidant, taking no damage for that. Dark Confidant coming in out of the sideboard, deciding that he needs a little bit more Grindfest in this match, a couple more creatures, since usually he only runs the one of Nether Spirit in his main board. Seeing a Pithing Needle, probably naming the Retrofitter Foundry. He could name Allosaurus Shepherd here, but I don't think that it's really necessary. Naming the Retrofitter Foundry is going to be much more effective, kind of shutting down Steven from being able to react at all. No blockers. And now Steven is hellbent here. He's got no lands. If Pithing Needle's on Retrofitter, then he's got no action. Carlo's pretty happy. Decides, I can plus discard a Thoughtseize. This card doesn't do anything for me. Probably gonna get a Dryad Arbor. Oh no! Oh. An Assassin's Trophy. Assassin's Trophy, can it get... Search their library for a basic land card. Steven says, that's too much for me. Let's move on. On to game 3. A Thoughtseize. Kind of revealing the hand before the land was pulled up. I guess you have to get a Bayou, since it's off of a wooded foothills. Taking the Thoughtseize right back. Steven protecting his hand there. I'm not sure what the anime card is there. It might be a Liliana. Just an ignoble hierarch after the Wasteland turn. Steven having some mana to back up his plays here, an ignoble into a Dryad Arbor. So although Steven has only 2 lands in play, he's got 4 mana. We're seeing a Sudden Edict is going to get rid of the tapped ignoble hierarch. Sends it right back. Natural Order, is this going to grab Atraxa? Yeah, it kind of looks like it, probably. So Atraxa is going to draw a bunch of cards. Going to look at the top 10 cards. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And he's going to basically get one of each card type that exists in Magic right now. So land, creature, sorcery, instant, battle, planeswalker. Did I say instant? Tribal. That's 8. Planeswalker. I don't know. I'm probably renaming cards here. So we see instant, land, sorcery, and creature. So that's going to net Steven 4 cards. We see another Sudden Edict in Carlos's hand here. He fires it off. He gets rid of the Dryad Arbor. Not a super useful Sudden Edict. But he's not drawing the lands, so it's not really helping. Kind of his only play there. 1 mana for a Pithing Needle. What would you name? Liliana? Liliana of the Veil, maybe? Because if you name Liliana, then he can't force you to sacrifice creatures. Steven having backup creatures to make sure you can sacrifice in case there's more edict effects. We see this Plague Engineer kind of sitting here. Carlos probably going to throw that guy into play. Name whatever Dryad Arbor is. Dryad Arbor being a Forest Dryad. Atraxa crashing in for 7 here. So Steven making the construct, just constantly making it so he's got at least 1 creature extra in play besides Atraxa. And Atraxa is black, so Snuff Out's not going to do it here. Looks like Carlos needs to draw Assassin's Trophy. There's not much else that's going to close out the game here. And that is a concede from Carlos, so Steven's going to take it 2-1. Welcome to looking at some sideboard stuff. So it looks like he brought in the 4 Dark Confidant and the 2 Plague Engineer out of his sideboard. That makes sense to me. Plague Engineer, of course, you always bring in against an Elves list, no matter what it is. And the Dark Confidants to kind of grind him out a little bit better. And it looks like Steven brought in a ton of stuff. Stuff that's not on his list here. But Atraxa was definitely, I think, the shining star that came in out of the sideboard. Really turned the game around and led him to victory in that Game 3. Hey, thanks for joining us for this round. If you're new here, why don't you consider subscribing to the channel? You can stay up to date on all of our cool stuff. I think that there's a bell icon that you can click too, so you can see as soon as I drop these videos. If you are returning, we always appreciate a like, and you know what? I'm just very appreciative that you're here watching this at all. So thanks for the view. If you're interested in these deck lists, they're always in the description of the video. So go ahead and scroll down just a little bit there. Should have the description of, or should have all kinds of different links to the decks, to our Discord, to the Instagram, all that stuff. Thanks as always to Spellhold Games and Collector Legion for allowing us to record in their play space. We really appreciate it. We wouldn't exist without you. Just, if you haven't already watched it, you should watch our streams. They're happening every first and third Tuesdays of the month. If you are watching this video, it probably is released sometime on the second or fourth Tuesdays of the month. I'm not entirely certain, but join us on stream nights so that you can stay in the loop of all of our cool new meta stuff and, you know, just watch us play some fun Legacy. I think that's going to do it for us for this one. As always, I'm Eugene, and this is Tuesday Night Legacy. We'll see you next time.